K1 machine setup and operation. The K1 machine video starts with the assumption that the machine is already out of the crate and set up at the operating location. If this has not been done, please refer to the K1 user's manual for uncrating instructions before beginning this video. Once the K1 machine is removed from the crate and is at its final operating location, the first step in setup is to level the machine. This is done by using an adjustable wrench to turn the bolts on the leveling pads and lower them so they are touching the floor. This must be done on each side of the machine. To level the machine, place a level onto the bed and measure left to right leveling. Place the level on the rollers, preferably a steel roller, for front to back leveling. A precision level is not necessary for this procedure. A standard level can be used to get the desired results. Once the machine is in place, tighten the bolts so that the leveling pads are flat with the floor. The next step in the process is the electrical setup. To set up the electrical, move to the back of the machine and locate the control cabinet on the left-hand side. Open the control cabinet to reveal the electrical components. Please note, this machine is set up as single-phase wiring and cannot be set up as three-phase wiring. The location for installing the electrical is on the lower left-hand side of the electrical strip. Take caution when connecting the electrical that the supply power should go through a disconnect switch prior to the machine. If there is no disconnect switch, the machine will still have power on the supply side even with the machine main switch in the off position. We recommend that a skilled electrician or maintenance person with electrical skills complete the necessary steps for this setup. The first step in machine setup is adding solvent to the machine. To do this, loosen the knobs that hold the tank bracket in place and lower the tank unit. Once the unit is lowered so that the tank can be easily reached, tighten the knobs and secure the brackets into place. Remove the tank lid and wipe out any residual solvent or dirt that might have accumulated in the bottom of the tank. Pour the new solvent into the tank and place the lid on top. Warning: before pouring solvent into the tank, ensure the solvent tank lever is in the off position or the solvent will run out of the bottom of the tank. Next, loosen the tank knobs and raise the tank back into position about 6 feet from the floor. Tighten the tank knobs that were previously loosened and secure the shaft holding the tank. Place a towel under the wick assembly and open the solvent tank valve. Solvent should be seen flowing through the tank hose to the wick assembly. Next, go to the main operator panel and locate the main applicator switch in the bottom left-hand corner. Turn this switch to the manual position. Move back to the wick assembly and rotate the valve on the front counterclockwise 1 complete turn. There is a small Allen screw on the valve that can be used as a guideline. Solvent should begin to flow to the wick assembly within 30 seconds. This flow will start slowly with the wick turning damp and then begin dripping from the wick. Go back to the main operator panel and turn the main applicator switch to the auto position. Solvent may continue to flow for a few seconds. Maintain the rag under the wick assembly so it doesn't come in contact with the rollers. After the solvent has been added to the machine, the following steps can be used for machine setup. remove the outer chuck assembly from the unwind shaft. This is done by turning the handle counterclockwise and sliding off the outside chuck and the adapter. Add the raw material to the unwind shaft. If the material is printed, the ink should be facing up so that the orientation of the finished tube is correct. Slide the outer chuck assembly back onto the unwind shaft. During this operation, it is important to line up the tab on the chuck with the groove on the shaft so the chuck slides on perfectly straight. The tab on the chuck is designed to ensure that it doesn't slip in the core during the machine operation. Once the chuck is correctly installed on the machine, tighten the lockdown on the chuck clockwise. If there is still some play with the chuck, rotate the inner ring located between the lockdown assembly and the core clockwise. It will continue to tighten the chuck against the core on the outside and inside so sufficient pressure is maintained. Next, move to the rewind shaft on the other side of the machine. Use the same process as the unwind core and remove the outer chuck assembly. Place the correct core size onto the center of the rewind shaft and slide the outer chuck assembly back onto the shaft. During this operation, it is important to line up the tab on the chuck with the groove on the shaft so the chuck slides on perfectly straight. Once the chuck is correctly installed on the machine, tighten the lockdown on the chuck clockwise. If there is still some play with the chuck, rotate the inner ring located between the lockdown assembly and the core clockwise. It will continue to tighten the chuck against the core on the outside and inside so sufficient pressure is maintained. Pin installation. Pin size must be determined and cut before this step in the machine setup process. Please refer to the K1 User's Manual for pin sizing and cutting instructions before moving forward to the next step. Once you have your correct pin size, insert one side of the pin into the forming fingers, and then tighten the fingers with the adjustment knob on the front of the machine. As the forming fingers are tightening, wrap your hand around the outside of each forming finger and squeeze them together to make sure the pin sets in the adjacent hole. Once the pin is in the correct position, measure the inside distance between the forming fingers at the pin location. Next, follow the forming fingers to the upper forming finger bracket assembly. Apply the same measurement determined for the pin. Once the distance is set, slightly close the bracket so the measurement is 3 mm smaller than the distance at the pin. This creates a slight amount of pressure on the forming fingers. Next, turn the forming roller's handle to open the distance between the rollers and the fingers. Once the pin has been installed, the next step in the process is threading the material through the machine. The first thing you want to do is make sure the unwind switch in the machine is turned off and the emergency stop button is pressed. Next, thread the material through the machine per the web threading diagram on page 6 of the User's Manual. Once the material is threaded through the machine, tape the leading edge of the material onto the rewind core. Now go to the main operator panel and make the following preliminary adjustments. Turn the unwind switch to the on position. Set the initial tension to 2 on the potentiometer. Set the rewind tension to 2 on the potentiometer. Set the rewind oscillation switch to auto, and set the main speed potentiometer to the 0 position. You also want to release the e-stop button and turn the reset switch to off. Check to be sure the speed potentiometer is in the 0 speed position. Press the start button and a green light will come on. Gently turn the speed potentiometer clockwise so the material slowly advances through the machine. As the material passes over the forming fingers, use your hand to help the material fold around the fingers. As you help the material fold, it will go through the nip roll and gradually form into a tube. Next, close the forming rollers by turning the adjustment knob on the front of the machine counterclockwise to tighten the rollers against the forming fingers. Close the rollers until they begin to make contact with the forming fingers. Next, take the white forming arm in the center of the machine and turn it so that the short side of the arm is on the side of the tube. Once the arm is in position, tighten it so that it stays in place. Next, loosen the knob on the outside of the wick assembly and lower it so that the felt is right to the edge of the flat material prior to entering the forming section. To make any final micro adjustments, turn the screw with the spring at the bottom of the unit. It's only necessary to turn the screw a slight amount to move the wick assembly. Once the wick is in the correct position, go to the operator panel and turn the solvent switch to the auto position. Start the machine and gently increase the speed. This is done by turning the speed adjustment knob on the panel clockwise until the machine is at the maximum speed of 100 meters per minute. As the machine speed is increasing, the solvent flow may need to be increased. This can be done by turning the silver knob on the outside of the wick assembly. Turn the knob counterclockwise for more solvent and clockwise for less solvent. Once the machine is running at the maximum speed, check the alignment of the wick to ensure it is at the edge of the material. The micro side-to-side adjustment is an Allen screw located on the side of the wick assembly next to the spring. Just turn the screw with your fingers for slight adjustments of the wick. Before beginning production, remove the setup roll with scrap from the rewind core and replace it with a new one. Once machine operation setup has been completed, you're ready to begin machine operation. To start, reset the footage meter by turning the knob on the side of the meter until all the numbers on the dial show as 0. Next, go back to the control panel and make sure the speed potentiometer dial is set to 0. Press the start button to begin machine operation. Lower the wick assembly so it's making contact with the film. Check the alignment of the wick to the edge of the substrate, making any minor adjustments. Turn the solvent application switch to the automatic position. Turn the speed dial clockwise to increase the line speed. Check the alignment of the web to ensure it is correct as the machine speed is increasing. The machine should now be in production. Make any necessary adjustments as the machine is continuing. Make any finalized unwind and rewind tension adjustments.